If you are pregnant or you've recently had a baby, this podcast is for you. I am your host, Kath Bequee, a physiotherapist working in women's health and mum of 3 based in Melbourne, Australia. Join me as we dive into all things pelvic floor and core, as well as talking to different industry experts, helping you to have a healthy pregnancy, confident childbirth, and strong postnatal recovery. Hit subscribe. You're listening to the FitNest Mama Podcast. To attend my free pregnancy mini pelvic floor and core masterclass, head to fitnestmama.com/free. Well, hello there. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the FitNest Mama Podcast. Today's episode is a beautiful one with Hannah, mum of 2 based in Sydney, member of FitNest Mama, and also co-host of the Baby Brain podcast, where she discusses all things parenting. I highly recommend it, and we'll link the Baby Brain podcast and all the details for how to connect with Hannah in the show notes. So Hannah's youngest daughter, Hazel, was recently born via elective caesarean, and Hannah walks us through this lovely experience that she describes step by step. Hannah also discusses how she's had abdominal muscle separation and how life is with 2 children under 2. It's a beautiful episode I trust you will love, so do stick around. Quickly, before we do dive into this episode, I want to let you know of a free pregnancy workshop that is available. This workshop will leave you feeling more confident and empowered about your upcoming birth experience. In this session, you will learn about how to prepare your pelvic floor for birth and beyond, including pelvic floor preparation, perineal massage, what it is, and how it might help to reduce your risk of perineal tears and episiotomy, as well as learn about after-birth recovery essentials to help you boost that all-important after-birth recovery period. So as a women's health physiotherapist, everything I share in this pregnancy workshop are things that I believe every woman deserves to know when pregnant to really help with her birth and after-birth experience. So to register, just head to fitnessmama.com/pregnancy workshop, and the link is also in the show notes. All right, let's get into this episode. So Hannah, thank you so much for joining me today on the FitNest Mama Podcast. You have
No worries.
Yes, you've got a lovely 9-week-old Hazel. And
I do.
And how old is Eli?
Eli is now, he'll be 2 in March. What does that make him? 22 months?
Yeah, amazing.
Yes.
So 2 under 2.
Yeah. So he was 20 months when she was born. So I've got that 4-month window of claiming the 2 under 2. Yeah.
Milk it.
Yeah.
So we're chatting today on the FitNest Mama Podcast. It's part of the Spilling the Milk series. So if you love a good birth story, every 4 to 6 episodes we have one of these. And so lucky to chat to you today, Hannah, who's a lovely member inside FitNest Mama and mum of 2. And Hannah, I don't know your birth story at all, so this is all going to be news. I don't know what type of birth, how it eventuated, all that sort of thing. So let's dive into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, first of all, while we're just chatting, has the transition to 2 children been?
It has been, I think it's been a bit easier than I thought it would be, but I was really conscious of lining myself up with a lot of support beforehand. So luckily my parents take Eli every day for a couple of hours, which has been so good. Also, by the way, I'm just rocking Hazel in the carrier at the moment, and she started sucking her hand. So if you hear any smacking of lips, I promise that's not me, that's the newborn. Yeah, but I think it has been easier than I thought it would be. But again, just setting up that support. And also we had Hazel on the 15th of November. So my husband took a few weeks off work, and then it was Christmas and New Year's. So he kind of was able to be available for 6 weeks while I settled into everything and while I recovered from the C-section. So that was really helpful as well.
I know that can sometimes add an element of stress because, you're trying to work out the timing. Did you find second time round, it seems that it was much easier or less stressful, like you weren't worried about the timing, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think so. Because with Eli, I really wanted to have a baby. And so we said, all right, we're going to start trying. Figured out when I was ovulating, had the app on my phone, had it all ready to go. And it took us 3 months to fall pregnant with Eli, which I know it's really quick in hindsight. But of course, when you first start trying for your first and you don't fall pregnant immediately, it's a bit of a shock. So I spent the first few months being like, oh my gosh, am I infertile? What's happening? Because I guess we grow up with sex ed classes and you kind of assume that if you even look at a penis, you're going to fall pregnant straight away. So, and then you have sex without contraception at exactly the right time and nothing happens. So I was quite stressed out, I would say, when we were trying for Eli. And then the second time around, I guess it's a little bit easier because you know that you can get pregnant. You've had a pregnancy and a baby before. And I guess there was no way for me to track things either because my period was so irregular. So I just had to kind of let Jesus take the wheel.
Yeah, for sure. So once you found out you're pregnant, when you eventually found out you were pregnant,
Yes.
Out of interest, how many weeks do you think you were when you did find out?
I think I was 3 weeks. So I reckon it was about the same time as it would have been if I was trying, which is so funny. I just had a feeling that I was. And we were watching a movie one night and I just fell asleep on the couch, which I never do. And I was thinking, that's weird. I'm really tired for some reason. And so I went and did a pregnancy test. Miles was out at the shops and I was at home with Eli. And I just thought, I've got one in the drawer. Maybe I'll give it a go. We'll see. Yeah, and it came back positive and it was wild. I was so excited.
Oh, it's amazing. Just at the time of recording, it's all about, COVID and rat tests and all the rest.
Yes.
And I love doing a rat test. Like if I've got a box, it's really hard not to just test it again. And I remember that when I was trying to fall pregnant, if I had a few pregnancy tests, like I would just go through that box like no tomorrow.
Yeah. It doesn't riddle you with anxiety. I feel like it does that for me because I have these anxious memories of peeing on a stick and thinking, oh my God.
It's that anticipation.
Yeah.
Mixed with anxiety. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so how did life change for you when you'd fallen pregnant second time round?
I think it was shocking how much it didn't change because first time you're pregnant, everybody's like, oh my gosh, let me open the door for you and have my seat. And are you hungry? Do you need to lie down? And then you get pregnant the second time and you've got a baby already and people are just kind of like, whatever. Well, that's kind of what I found. It's not like I could explain to Eli what was happening and why I was tired. And at that point in time, he was waking up at 4 a.m. in the morning every morning and I was still breastfeeding as well. So I would pull him into bed with me, try and feed him back to sleep, which usually wouldn't work. And I would just drag myself out of bed and be so tired. But I remember, so for a lot of my pregnancy, we were actually in lockdown. So there wasn't help around, which really sucked. And also I didn't get that experience. And I know it sounds a bit attention seeking, but it's nice having that experience when you walk out on the street and you're pregnant and you have a big belly and people smile at you and they say, oh, when are you due? And I got none of that because I was just at home, stuck at home with my toddler. Yeah. So I was surprised that things didn't really change that much. And luckily it was a fairly cruisy pregnancy as well.
That's good. Yeah. Now, you mentioned you were breastfeeding while you're pregnant.
Yes.
Did your breast milk change at all?
Not that I noticed, and I think not that Eli noticed either, because I was thinking I'll just let him wean because I've heard that the taste changes or it starts to dry up possibly, but none of that. None of that happened, and he kept going, and I was really keen to stop breastfeeding, but yeah, so I got halfway through the pregnancy and just started cutting feeds down and eventually got to just one feed at nighttime. And then I was just getting that, when you're breastfeeding, you get a bit of an ick. Like it felt a bit, I don't know, I was getting a bit touched out and I was trying to position him over the bump and he's a big boy, he's quite a big toddler. And yeah, it just got a bit too much for me eventually. So what we did was we swapped out the nighttime routine, and I got my husband to go in and read him a book instead. And I guess removing myself from that environment, he just kind of forgot about it. Thank God.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know it can be, a time when there's a lot of unknown, and sometimes mums don't know what they should do. They want to keep feeding, but they don't want to feed, and there's a lot of conflicting emotions. So it's really nice to hear your experience. Thank you. So you found that life just kept going on. You had a little toddler to run around. Your belly just happened to grow, but you weren't paying it any attention. How did you prepare for birth second time round? Was it different first time round?
Yeah, it was a little bit. Like, again, because we were in lockdown, and also I'm not sure if second pregnancy had anything to do with it, but I didn't have as many midwife appointments, and Miles wasn't allowed to come, which really sucked. So I was kind of going through all of that myself, and it didn't seem like there was too much attention or not too much of a focus on having those appointments, because second time, like, you've got this. I didn't really have any complications or anything. The only thing I did notice, though, is every time I went for an appointment, if it was a different midwife feeling around to see where the baby was, they would always comment on how bad my abdominal separation was, because Eli was a big boy. He was 4.4 kilos when he was born. And yeah, I think I just had a lot of fluid as well, and I was so often asked if I was having twins, and people would be like, whoa, you're huge, you must be due next week, and I was only second trimester. So I think, he did a number on me, on my abs, and those comments kept happening throughout the pregnancy. So I knew after I had Hazel, I'd have some work to do, which we'll get into, I'm sure. And in terms of preparation, with Eli, I had a C-section because he got to 41 plus 3. And they did a growth scan at 41 weeks, and they projected that he was 4.7 kilos and his head wasn't engaged. So they were kind of freaking out a little bit, and they were like, okay, well, he's huge. His head's probably too big to fit through your pelvis. So they gave me a choice of, we can either induce you or we can just book you in for an elective C-section. But if we do induce you, there's a high likelihood that you'll try and birth him and his head won't fit, and you'll have to have an emergency C-section anyway. So I kind of thought, I'm just going to avoid the drama and I'll just book in for the elective C-section. And I had a really, really good experience with that. It's not what I had anticipated. Like, I had always assumed that I was going to have a vaginal birth. But that's what happened, and I had a really good experience. So second time around, I knew that being my history, I had the option of trying for a VBAC or going for another elective C-section. And because the babies were quite close together, and also she was measuring very big throughout my pregnancy, I had some discussions with the midwives who were very open to me trying for a VBAC, but they did kind of caution that, you might be a little bit higher risk of a uterine rupture due to her size, and also the fact that they're only going to be 20 months apart, so there's not enough time really for it to properly heal. So considering all of that, I decided that I would just book in for an elective C-section. And so preparation was kind of just wrapping my head around what I wanted that experience to be. And I guess there's less variables, I think, with a C-section. You kind of, I guess, maybe going into labour for a vaginal birth, there's a few different things that can happen and it seems quite out of your control, whereas my experience having a C-section, everything was quite controlled. And I was excited about that.
Yeah. Actually, I'd like to dive into that because I feel there's a lot of help and support in preparing for a vaginal birth because, as you said, there are a lot of variables and, a lot of unknowns. But I feel there's actually less support for those women who are preparing for caesarean birth. So I'm just totally putting you on the spot here. What were even if it's just one or two or three things, what's three things that really helped you in the lead up to the caesarean and during and after? But are there any, even doesn't matter how small it is or how, was it music or lights or talking, was there anything that really helped with that birth process?
Yeah. I think having Miles there, having my partner there was amazing because I'm very much like I don't want to see anything or know anything about what's going on behind the curtain. So I was quite keen on having Miles there to just kind of chat to, and he could calm me down a little bit. Doing research helped as well. But in saying that, I actually saw a post on Instagram recently which was about having more of a natural style caesarean where you can see the baby coming out or even assist in pulling them out. I didn't know that that was an option, and they don't really talk to you about that in the medical system.
Well, at the time of recording, I've just interviewed a lovely obstetrician about maternal-assisted caesarean birth. So by the time this episode is live, it will be a few episodes prior. So if you're interested in listening to a podcast episode about maternal-assisted caesarean sections, it's amazing. Like, check out this episode. It's great.
Yeah.
And I'll link it below in the show notes too.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, see, knowing all of that I think would have been good. I'm not sure if I would have gone for that option, but knowing that you have the choice. I went through the public system, which I think was incredible, but I'm not sure if maybe if I had a private obstetrician, those options would have been more at the forefront. In saying that, I still had such a good experience having a C-section birth, and my preparation was really just kind of working on things that would keep me calm and level-headed during the procedure. So thinking about breathing and also just having a bit of a distraction. Miles making jokes next to me throughout the procedure, and that was kind of my preparation.
Yeah, interesting. So like breathing techniques we learn, like often women do learn for vaginal birth, and it's great if you're listening and you end up having an emergency caesarean, you can still often use, and I often teach this too inside FitNest Mama with all the childbirth techniques. I'm like, it doesn't matter what sort of birth you have. These are lifelong skills. Like I still use breathing techniques when at the time toddler, now 4-year-old, is having a tantrum. And so much so that my kid's like, mum's doing her deep breathing. She's not happy. But yeah, I do think it's a great skill to learn no matter where you're at in life.
Definitely.
It's like almost a quick form of meditation, isn't it?
This episode is brought to you by Baby Bee, Australian-owned and designed prams combining quality, safety and style. Not only does Baby Bee let you try their prams at home with free returns for 9 months. Yes, that's 9 months. They also offer an industry-leading 3-year warranty for total peace of mind. With thousands of 5-star reviews, around-the-clock customer care, and up to $300 of free accessories with every pram, what are you waiting for? Go visit www.babybeeonline.com and check them out for yourself. And yes, for listeners of the podcast, there is a 20% discount code. Enter FITBEE, FITBEE 20 at checkout, and T's and C's apply.
Yeah, and it is, I mean, as much as the C-section process is controlled, it is still a little bit nerve-wracking because it's quite a clinical setting. So you've got that on your mind that it's a major surgery that's happening. So anything to kind of keep you calm and relaxed is extremely helpful.
And did you use music at all?
No, I didn't. So I'm not sure. I think this is just me, like a personality thing. I'm not sure if music would really help or if it would be more distracting for me.
Yeah, totally.
And also, I don't know what song I'd pick. It's like too many choices, and then you have that's your birthing song. I went through this when we were trying to decide the song for our first dance at our wedding. I was like, I can't. It's too much of a big decision. I can't do it.
Yeah. Someone once asked me that in one of the pregnancy workshops I run. They're like, what music do you recommend? I was like, whoa, I can't answer that. What sort of music do you like? Do you like calming music? Would you like something a bit more uplifting? There's no right or wrong answer, and it's just really personal. And you're right. For me, it was just choosing that wedding song was highly nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Oh, so funny. Okay, so talk me through what happened in the lead up to giving birth to Hazel.
So in this pregnancy, I was actually having a lot of Braxton Hicks, which I had with Eli, but only in the last couple of weeks. So with Hazel, I was getting them from about 20 weeks, from about halfway through. And I was very confused towards the end, thinking, oh, is this early labour? I don't know, because they were getting quite close together and quite intense. She was posterior as well. So I could really feel them when the Braxton Hicks was happening. I was like, ooh, that's a little bit uncomfortable in my lower back. So, yeah, in the lead up, I wasn't sure if I was going to go into labour naturally prior to the C-section being booked. So we'd booked it for 39 weeks. And the hospital kind of, at one point they said, oh, we don't have any room on those dates. And I was like, okay, what are we going to do then? You've got to get this baby out of me somehow. So it was a bit of shuffling around with the dates, and even the week beforehand they were saying, I'm not sure if we can get you in on this one, and if not, we'll do a different date. So I guess there was a bit of an element of almost having a natural birth experience where, you know, it's you never know when it's going to happen. But I was a bit worried that, well, not worried, I was possibly a little bit excited that I would maybe go into labour beforehand, but that didn't happen. So we went up to the hospital on the day that I had the booking, and when I got to the hospital, the Braxton Hicks contractions were actually getting very intense and they were getting quite close together. So I was almost convinced that I was in early labour when I was up in the hospital, and I told the midwives and they were kind of like, oh, well, you know, well, you're having your baby today anyway, so cool. But then when I got wheeled into the surgery, the obstetrician did an exam and he said, no, your cervix is completely closed. Oh. So
you're like, no.
I know. I kind of, because with Eli, I didn't go into labour either. And I just wanted that experience of being like, oh, I'm having a contraction.
Oh,
but I
it's
think
a shame he told you, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. I could have just kind of been blissfully in denial. But what I missed out on prior to birth, I made up for post-birth in post-birth contractions, which I had some really intense ones, and that is full on having those on top of having a C-section scar. So the joys.
How long did they last for?
They lasted for a few days with Hazel. With Eli, it was only 1 day. But I think it's actually quite rare to get them with your first baby anyway, or so I've been told, that you're more likely to get more of them with subsequent children.
Yeah. I remember that with my third compared to my first.
Yeah, right.
Did you do anything to help with those after-birth pains?
Just breathing.
Breathing,
I kind of and I would always like curl. I guess this was maybe a subconscious thing I was doing, but I would be curling my toes when they'd be happening. So I'd kind of focus on my toes and do little toe movements to kind of count my way through it.
Oh, good one. Yeah. I like that. So can you talk us through the birth story? Like I know, it's an elective caesarean, like that's just beautiful, but I'd love to know the process. Like you arrived in hospital.
Yeah.
And what happened?
Yeah, so I got to hospital. First thing they do is they check your bloods. So they've got a most recent blood count just in case, in the very rare occurrence that something might happen, and they need to give you a transfusion. So they do that first. We got kind of checked in, sounds like a hotel. We got checked into our hospital room, and we just waited there for a little while. So with Hazel, we were the second elective C-section for the day. So there was one woman before us and then they came and got us afterwards. So Miles and I were kind of patiently waiting in the room, and this was when I was having these Braxton Hicks and thinking, oh my God, I'm in labour. So the obstetrician did come in at one point and he kind of felt around to see where she was sitting. I guess so he knew prior to the surgery, and that's when he said to me as well, he said, your muscle separation is quite bad. And I was like, thank you. Yes, I've been told. But he said, if you like, I can try and bring it together during the surgery and put some stitches in to try and close that up. And I was like, wow, okay, yes, please. Never heard of that happening before, but let's see how we go. So he offered that. He went off to do this other elective C-section. They came back when it was time and came and got me and Miles. And so firstly, they kind of wheel you into this staging area, as I like to call it, and Miles was not allowed in the room. So I think they don't let partners in because this is when they do the spinal and they might freak out seeing needles going into the spine. So it was just me in there and the anaesthetist and some other nurses. They put the cannula in, which took them 3 goes, which was a bit of a little bit stressful, but that's all right. Yeah. And then they put the spinal in, so they get you to sit on the edge of the bed and lean forward, which of course, if you're heavily pregnant, is really difficult to do. But I'm sure a lot of women have had that experience with a C-section or with an epidural as well. Yeah, and so they put that in, and that's where they kind of prep everything for you and put you back down on the bed, and then once you're ready, they wheel you into the actual theatre. So at that point, Miles gets brought, so your partner gets brought back into the room. So Miles came back in and the curtain was up, and in my experience with Hazel, the obstetrician was there, but he also had a doctor in training. And so he was explaining to her everything that was happening. And he was like, okay, making the incision here. You need to cut there. There's the bladder. Let's move that bladder over to the side. And I'm just sitting there going, stop talking. I don't want to hear this.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. So I was like trying to tune that out, but I was doing some breathing techniques. I was chatting to Miles, trying to make it kind of casual and just chill. So it took them a little longer with Hazel than it did with Eli. With Eli, it was quite quick, but I think that can be common because they're cutting through the scar tissue. So I was getting kind of pushed and pulled around a little bit, but I obviously couldn't see what was going on because I had the curtain up. And then at one point, the obstetrician said, I need forceps. Can whoever get me some forceps? And I got a little bit stressed with that because I'd never heard of forceps being used in a caesarean birth before. So I was thinking, is there something going wrong? Like, is everything all right? And it was only like a minute or 2 afterwards that she was out and she was fine. But they did. So with C-section births, as I'm sure you know, they drop the curtain and do a little like Lion King moment where they kind of hold your baby up and present them to you. And I remember that being a very beautiful moment with Eli, and they held him up and we looked at him and it was really cute, and then they took him off. But with Hazel, he kind of pulled her out and the curtain went down and he flicked her up and then just kind of slid her over to the side to the midwife really quickly. And I was again thinking, is something going wrong? Is everything okay? So it was really quite rushed. And I think everything was fine. In hindsight, I think it was possibly because he had to use forceps. So he had to get her to the midwife to check that everything was fine quite quickly. But she went over to the table and she was crying, letting out these massive big cries, which was really cute. And Miles cut the cord and then she was brought over to me, and I just couldn't get over how much she looked like Eli. Like, it was insane. They're just clones of each other.
Oh, amazing.
And Eli looks so much like Miles, and everybody says that. They're like, oh, wow, look, it's just a mini Miles. And I was really hoping, having a girl, that she would look like me. And now she just looks like Eli.
Did you know you were having a girl?
I did, yeah. I'm that kind of person that needs to find out straight away. So as soon as I could do the blood test, I found out and I was just ecstatic.
Yeah, beautiful.
I really wanted a little girl. So I was I would have loved a boy as well, but very happy with Hazel. Yeah, and so when she came over to me, I'd spoken to the midwife about possibly initiating breastfeeding on the operating table, which I'd done with Eli successfully, but she was a bit like, oh, well, we're going to be in recovery really quickly and it's really hard to position them when you've got the curtain up. So we kind of discussed it and said, oh, okay, well, I was like, well, that's fine. We can just wait to recovery. But when they put her on my chest, even though I didn't have my boob out, she nuzzled her way down and found the nipple and started feeding straight away.
Amazing.
Yeah. Even though I hadn't prepped anything for her to do it, she just kind of worked it out, which was so incredible. And yeah, so she was feeding, and then I started getting these really hectic shakes, which again, I know can be a very common occurrence in a C-section birth. And it's something to do, I think, with your body reacting to the morphine or to the spinal. So I was just, like at a rave party with no music, really, really shaking. And it was freaking me out a little bit, but mainly because I was shaking on top of her, and I was thinking, I don't really want her to fall off. So Miles had one arm over, holding her on there, and I was speaking to the anaesthetist saying, I'm a little bit worried. Is everything okay? And he was great. He was very reassuring and saying, this is completely normal. This happens to quite a lot of people, and it passes really quickly, which it did. It was gone within maybe 5-10 minutes. Yes, and so they stitched everything up and took me into recovery, and she kept feeding in there, which was lovely. But I did notice at that point that she had it's not funny, I don't know why I'm laughing, she had quite bad bruising on her face from the forceps. So yeah, that was a little bit sad to see. It would have been such a harsh entrance to the world for her to just get kind of pulled out and yeah. But anyway, she was fine. There were no issues with how everything had kind of sorted itself out, and the bruising went down within a day, which was great. So yeah, so we were in recovery. Everything was fine. My blood pressure and everything was all stable. So I got wheeled off to my room and stayed there for the next couple of days, which was crazy. First time in a long time I didn't have a toddler running around. I didn't really know what to do with myself, and people were bringing me food. I had a catheter in. I didn't need to get up and go to the toilet. It was great.
You found it a really different experience second time round in hospital?
Yeah, I did, because I think I just didn't have that anxiety that you have first time around, because you're thinking, oh, is this normal? Is everything okay, kind of thing. Whereas if you've been through it before, you've got a bit of a feel for what to expect, I guess, which I think made it easier for me to just enjoy the experience a bit more and relax a bit. As much as I missed Eli, it was really nice having a little bit of time off from the toddler.
I distinctly remember when my toddler came to visit. She was 22 months old, and she ended up having a meltdown when my husband had to take her away, and I could hear her yelling down the hospital passageway, and then I remember that moment of silence. And it's this mixture of guilt and pleasure all mixed together.
You feel guilty for enjoying it, hey, but it is so good.
So how was the pain after you'd had Hazel?
Yeah, it was a lot more manageable than the first time. So the first time, I won't lie, I found it excruciating to get up out of bed, which is where the pain comes in after a C-section. And I was preparing myself for that again with Hazel, but I'm not sure what it was. I was quite a lot more active during my pregnancy with Hazel because I was chasing Eli around. I was doing some of your classes. So I was staying quite fit and active. And I think maybe that helped as well, that the recovery process seemed a little bit easier second time around. It was painful but manageable pain. Like with Eli, the first time I got out of bed, I was crying. And with Hazel, I kind of was just, again, doing some breathing techniques, trying to focus on my breath, and yeah. And that's really interesting you found the pain was less second time round. So, yeah, really interesting. You mentioned that you found it sore when you got out of bed. Yes.
How were you getting out of bed? Sounds silly.
With great difficulty. So I because the hospital beds, you can press a button and then it kind of sits you up, right? So I'd done that and I'd shuffled my way down and slowly swung my legs over the side. I lowered the bed so it was at a height where I could kind of comfortably tip myself off. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I did it. I got Miles to stand in front of me and to help me kind of hold my hands, so help me up when I initially got off the bed. And then I just shuffled my way very slowly into the shower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just out of interest, did you ever do a log roll? So when you were lying on your back and you rolled onto your side and then you pop your feet over the edge? Is that what you're describing?
Yes. I did do a log roll.
So for anyone listening, if you're having a caesarean, log roll is the bomb, where you get to the edge of the bed, you roll on your side first, and then you use your arms to push you up rather than using your tummy muscle, and use your arms to push you up as you swing your legs over.
Yeah, definitely. You don't want to put any strain on those tummy muscles straight after a C-section.
Okay, so you found those early few days better second time round, and then you came home and you had a toddler in the mix. How was your recovery once you came home?
It was, there were a few days that I definitely overextended myself, and I think that's easy to do when you have a little toddler running around because you don't think about it as much. And you're not supposed to do any heavy lifting for 6 weeks after a C-section, and that is really difficult when you have a kid that wants to be picked up. So I'm very much like, get going. Like, I like to go for walks and I like to kind of get up and be active. So I found it quite difficult to tell myself to chill out a bit.
Yeah. I was going to ask, did the obstetrician end up doing that extra tummy thing?
He did.
He did? Okay. So was that like an abdominoplasty, or he just put a few clips in? You're not sure?
I think he just what they said was they were going to put some sutures in.
Yeah.
Which I guess is stitches.
Yeah.
I don't know too much about medical stuff, but so he said that he put that in, and I actually recently had my checkup, my 6-week checkup, and it didn't work. So my abdominal separation is the doctor said it's severe. So she was feeling different. She said that in one section it seemed a bit closer together, which is possibly where he put the stitches in. He wasn't totally convinced when he spoke to me anyway. He said, oh, look, I'll see what I can do. I can possibly do something that might make it a little bit less severe. So she could comfortably fit 2 fingers in one section, and in the higher section she could comfortably fit 3 fingers. So she seemed to think that was, she said to me, I can fit 2 fingers here, which would be about 4 centimetres of separation, and above that 3 fingers, which I'm assuming means 6 centimetres.
Yeah.
And I guess that's not good.
Well, no, not necessarily. Is that when you were lying down, resting, or when you were doing a sit-up?
When I was doing the sit-up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So abdominal muscle separation, so that, for anyone listening, we're totally getting onto a whole different topic here. How long does everyone have? So that's a ligament, the linea alba, that runs up and down, runs just below the belly button. It connects your abdominal muscles together. And so if there's a separation, that means that there's thinning out of that ligament sometimes. That's what that's referring to. So I guess it's one element of your abdominal core control. It's just one part. So you've still got lots of layers of abdominal muscles. There's lots of things still there to help support your spine. There's just one element that might be weaker than usual. So the size of the abdominal muscle separation isn't the be-all and end-all. It's more about, your strength and your control and how it's functioning as a whole.
Yeah, well, that's good. That makes me feel a bit better.
Yeah.
Because, she did refer me on to a women's health physio who I'll go and see. Yep. And I knew throughout the whole pregnancy, when everybody had mentioned that, when they did an exam, that my muscle separation was quite bad. So I knew that I'd have some work to do, and I'm keen on doing some of your classes as well to assist with that now in my recovery. But she did mention that the women's health physio will use an ultrasound, and they'll be able to tell via the ultrasound in a bit more detail what needs to be done.
Yeah, so for anyone listening, it doesn't, if you've got an abdominal muscle separation, it doesn't mean you have to have surgery. So sometimes all you need is to do a rehab plan to help all the muscles, surrounding muscles, get stronger. So hopefully that provides reassurance. And even if you did end up having surgery, it's really still great to do that postnatal rehab before and after too.
Yeah, that's great. And the surgery, is that like a tummy tuck surgery?
Well, I think it's different depending on what sort of surgeon you go and see.
Okay, sure.
So that's why I was asking, just because we were talking about your afterbirth recovery in that first 6 weeks. So I was wondering if they'd given you any extra restrictions and told you not to do anything extra because they'd put in those sutures. Yeah, interesting.
No, they didn't. Yeah, and I'd even told the midwife afterwards because I had home visits with my midwife, which was great. And I'd mentioned that to her that they put the stitches in, and she said, "Oh, really? I've never heard of that." So, yeah, whatever he did is, I guess, not the usual procedure. So lucky me, guinea pig.
Too funny. No, it's so great you've got that follow-up because you're still really early days. So, yeah, I wouldn't worry too much.
Yeah, and she did say it would be if I go and see a women's health physio and do some exercises, she thought that I'd be able to close to repair it. So, so that's good.
Yeah, brilliant. So this was all you just had your baby a few weeks ago. So you're still really early days, aren't you?
It is. And you can probably hear her little squawks in the carrier at the moment. So, yes.
She sounded like a little munchkin throughout the whole session. So if you're listening and you can hear it, it's beautiful. It's a little snuffling sound. So thank you so much for sharing your story, Hannah. It's been really lovely to hear of your experience with not only one but 2 elective caesareans. Yeah. And it's so great to hear a really wide variety of stories, no matter what sort of birth it ends up being. So thank you for sharing.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me on. I love your podcast. I listen to it every week, so very excited to come on as a guest.
Oh, brilliant. And to finish off with, how did you find FitNest Mama helped you the most with your pregnancy or recovery experience?
I think I really do believe that the reason why my recovery was easier this time around was because I was doing those little workouts at home and going on lots of walks and being a lot more active. So for me, I really enjoyed doing the workouts for pregnancy and using the ones that you have online that are the videos so I could kind of do it in my own time. Like when I got Eli down for a nap or when I had a minute to myself, I'd quickly pop one on. And I think it's incredible that you have some that are 15 minutes as well, because often that's the only window of time that you have when you have kids or you're a busy soon-to-be mum. So I really, really enjoyed the pre-pregnancy workouts.
Oh, that's great to hear, Hannah. And to finish off with, for any pregnant mum or new mum listening today, what word, again, I'm throwing this at you, but if you have a couple of words of wisdom, what would you offer? What would you say? Words of advice.
Ooh. I think try and go in with as little expectations as possible, because I've learned from my experience that, especially with Eli, what you think is going to happen might not necessarily be the case, and it's not the end of the world at all. I think some women see a C-section as kind of a last resort, like if nothing else works, that's the last resort, which is a real shame because it is a lovely way to meet your baby, I had 2 beautiful experiences having C-sections. So my only words of wisdom would be just try not to plan too much. Make sure that you're educating yourself, I think, so you've got the knowledge available for every kind of scenario if it does come up, but just enjoy it.
Oh, I love that. Thank you, Hannah. And for women who are wanting to connect with you, where can we find you? Because you also have a podcast, don't you?
I do. So you can, if you want to connect with me on Instagram, my personal Instagram is just Hannah Hellier, HANNAHHELLYER. But I have a podcast called the Baby Brain Podcast, which I host with my beautiful friend Emma. And we kind of just talk trash. We do share some mum life moments. It's a little bit of an informative / comedy podcast, and we get on some amazing guests as well, including yourself, Kath, who we had on for an episode last year. So you can check out that podcast on Instagram at Baby Brain Podcast or on Spotify and Apple.
And would highly recommend it. These guys are great. So I will put all those links in the show notes. Thanks for coming on, Hannah. We'll chat soon.
Amazing. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to the FitNest Mama Podcast, brought to you by my free pregnancy mini pelvic floor and core masterclass, which you will find at fitnestmama.com/free. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and come and say hi.
DM me on Instagram. I would love to hear from you. It's at FitNest Mama. Until next time, remember, a healthy pregnancy, confident birth, and strong after-birth recovery is something that you deserve. Remember our disclaimer. Materials and contents in this podcast are intended as general information only and shouldn't substitute medical advice, diagnosis, and treatment. I'll see you soon.